They say the northern winds remember everything, every scream, every oath, every soul that froze before it could beg the sky for mercy. And among the oldest whispers of the high Arctic is the tale of the Eight of Frosthaven Sound, a story so cursed that whalers refused to speak it aloud unless the sea was calm and the sun refused to set. In the summer of 1630, the merchant ship, the Dawn Seeker, sailed into the white jaws of the Arctic, led by the hardened whaling captain Ronan Grave, a man whose life had been carved by storms and sharpened by harpoons. His crew feared him, but they trusted him until the day he sent 8 men ashore on a simple hunt that should have lasted a single night. The chosen 8 boarded a shallow draft boat and pushed toward the reindeer-rich hills inland. They carried little: 2 hunting lances, a tinderbox, a crude snap-hands firearm, and 2 dogs. They expected to return before dawn, but the Arctic does not care for expectations. When night fell, the wind rose like a living thing. It clawed at the sea, dragging the Dawn Seeker away from shore. By morning, the ship was gone, swallowed by fog and distance. The 8 men stood alone on the frozen coast, staring at the empty horizon, and that was when the first dread settled in their bones. They decided to head south, toward Frosthaven Sound, where the fleet was scheduled to gather before returning to England. They had 3 days to cross a coastline that shifted like a living maze. Their leader, or the closest thing to one, was Garrick Thorne, a gunner with more pride than sense. He claimed he knew the land. He claimed he had been here before. He claimed the Arctic wasn't as cruel as the stories said. The others followed because they had no choice. They rode through fog so thick it felt like wet wool pressed against their faces. The dogs whimpered. The oars creaked. The sea slapped the hull with slow, deliberate rhythm, as if counting down. When they reached Green Harbor, the place where Captain Grave might have waited, they found nothing but abandoned fire pits and the skeletal remains of old whaling racks. The fleet had already moved on. Panic began to gnaw at them. They dumped their hard-won venison overboard to lighten the boat. They pushed toward Frosthaven Sound with blistered hands and hollow stomachs. But the fog thickened, and Garrick Thorne, the only man who claimed to know the way, began to falter. The Arctic coastline is a liar. It repeats itself. It hides its landmarks. It shifts with the tides and the drifting ice. And in that white labyrinth, Garrick Thorne's confidence became a curse. Further south, he insisted, Frosthaven Sound is further south. But Elias Crow, the youngest of the 8, felt something was wrong. He had no experience, no authority, only instinct. And instinct screamed that Thorne was leading them into the jaws of something ancient. They rode for hours, then for a day, then for 2. The fog never lifted, the coastline never changed, and the dogs began to growl at nothing. When Elias finally spoke up, Thorne snapped. He seized the oars, forcing the shallop further south. The boat rocked violently. One of the dogs fell into the sea, swallowed instantly by the freezing black. The men shouted. Thorne cursed. Elias screamed that they were going the wrong way, and for the first time, the others believed him. They turned the boat north. But the Arctic had already made its decision. They reached Frosthaven Sound on August 24th, one day too late. The fleet was gone. The beach was empty. The fire pits were cold. The tracks in the sand were already half erased by wind. The 8 men stood in silence, listening to the vast nothingness around them. Then they heard it, a low, distant moan. Not wind, not ice, but something older. Something that lived beneath the snow. Something that had watched them wander in circles and had been waiting for them to stop. Elias felt it first, a pressure behind the ribs, like a hand closing around his lungs. Thorn whispered, "The old stories, the ones the whalers tell. They say Frosthaven Sound is where the lost winter sleeps." The others stared at him. "What winter?" Elias asked. Thorn swallowed. "The one that never ended. The one that swallowed the first settlers whole. The one that takes men who die lost." The moan came again, closer now. The dogs whimpered and pressed themselves against the men's legs. And the sun, which should have hung in the sky all night, flickered just once, as if something enormous had passed in front of it. The Arctic summer does not allow darkness, but that night darkness came. Not a sunset, not a storm, a falling of the sky. The men scrambled to build a shelter from driftwood and old whaling debris. Their fire sputtered, refusing to stay lit. The air grew so cold their breath froze before it left their mouths. And then the shapes appeared, tall, thin, moving with the slow, deliberate grace of something that had never been human. They circled the shelter, their limbs bending at impossible angles. Their faces were long and hollow, like stretched masks of ice. Their eyes were pits of black winter. Elias whispered, "What are they?" Thorn answered with a voice that was no longer proud, no longer certain. "The lost winter's keepers." The creatures pressed closer. Their fingers scraped the wood. Their breath hissed like snow sliding off a roof. One of the men, Maddox, broke. He bolted into the dark, screaming. The creatures followed without sound. His screams stopped too quickly. The others huddled together, shaking, praying, waiting for dawn. But dawn did not come. Not for hours, not for days, not for the 8 of Frosthaven Sound. One by one, the men vanished. Some wandered into the dark, driven mad by whispers only they could hear. Some froze where they sat, their eyes open, frost blooming across their lashes. Some were taken by the tall, thin shapes that moved like broken shadows. Elias and Thorn were the last. They tried to reach the shallop, but the ice had swallowed it. They tried to light a fire, but the tinderbox snapped in half. They tried to pray, but the words froze on their tongues. On the final night, Elias saw the creatures gather around them in a perfect circle. Their heads tilted, their jaws opened, and from the darkness came a voice. Not spoken, but felt. "You were lost. Now you are ours." Thorn broke first. He ran into the circle. The creatures welcomed him. Elias closed his eyes, and the Arctic claimed him. The next summer, when the whaling fleets returned, they found Frosthaven Sound empty. No bodies, no boat, no tracks, only a crude shelter half buried in snow, and inside it, carved into the wood with shaking hands. We were not alone. We were not meant to survive, the winter remembers. To this day, sailors swear that when the fog rolls in thick, and the sun dims for no reason. You can hear them, the eight of Frosthaven sound, rowing endlessly along the coast, searching for a fleet that will never return. Some say the lost winter keeps them alive. Some say they became the tall, thin watchers. And some say that if you ever hear a low moan across the ice, you must never answer it, because the Arctic remembers the lost, and it is always hungry for more.